Alex Witkoff, Executive Vice President of Development of Witkoff, with local projects that include the development of the former Diplomat Golf Club into a private golf club designed by Greg Norman, with 100 branded residences and a boutique hotel. 700 North Miami Avenue, a mixed-use residential project on a site at Miami World Center, and the redevelopment of the historic Shore Club in Miami Beach. And our other panelist is Rishi Kapoor, founder and CEO of Location Ventures, whose projects include Villa Valencia, a luxury condo development in Coral Gables, and the Addition Residences, Fort Lauderdale, with 65 condos. He's also the managing partner of Urban, a co-living, co-working, and wellness brand. Both come from prominent real estate families, and they're now making their own marks in the industry. And both are based here. Rishi lives in Coral Gables, and Alex lives in Miami Beach. So we're very happy to have them here. Let's get started. First of all, how did each of you get your start in real estate development?
Take it first. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here with all of you, and looking forward to a great discussion, so thank you. For me, grew up in a family where my father came from India, 25 cents in his pocket, ultimately was an engineer in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm born and raised, have been now in South Florida over 21 years, but ultimately was feeling a bit of a glass ceiling in the South at that time, and quit real estate when quit working as an engineer after accumulating a warehouse portfolio in Marietta, Georgia, and then ultimately grew that to a portfolio of budget-oriented hotels throughout the Southeast. So I grew up going to Red Roof, Ramada, Days Inn conventions, and those were many of our trips growing up. Ultimately came down to the University of Miami for business and then law school. Decided that my passion for creativity would land me in legal malpractice, so decided to go into a different career path, and ultimately spent many years in sales and marketing in real estate here in South Florida, and then got out on our own with the family as investor number one, helping support our vision here with Location Ventures. So that's how we arrived at our founding just about 8 years ago.
Great. Alex?
Sure. So our story is not that dissimilar, but from New York, not Atlanta, Georgia. So I grew up in New York. My father started in real estate, built his business from scratch, from small loan from his father. And I grew around the business ever since I was 5 years old, going to construction sites, going into our office. Then it was in the Daily News building, an office building we owned. So ever since a very young age, I've been indoctrinated and imbued with real estate, going to construction sites, meeting with plumbers or general contractors and architects. So ever since I was really young, what I think is so fascinating about the real estate development business is it combines the mathematical with the creative. So the science on financing and investment philosophies, which markets you invest in, the macro around the property sector, but also with the creative components around how you develop, what you're creating, what you create for the end consumer. It's a really fascinating business because there's not a lot of things that really couple the investment and the mathematical with the creative. So I've always found it super fascinating, and fortunately I've been imbued with it ever since I was young.
That's great. So what was the first project that each of you led?
Sure. So, I actually went to Wharton undergraduate, spent some time at Morgan Stanley, been working at Witkoff now for almost 8 years. We spent a lot of time, we're actually in 3 markets, New York, on the West Coast, and South Florida. Was very much believe in starting from the bottoms up. So I was very involved in a project we built at West Hollywood Edition, which was branded residential. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the branded residential sector today. It was a 500,000 square foot development, 20 branded residences, 190 key hotel. We worked on with Ian Schrager from the Edition brand. And now we've been involved in projects throughout all three markets. So we're developing a big project in New York, One High Line with Access Industries, which is a Faena hotel and branded residential above. We have three major developments in Florida. So we've grown quite exponentially over the past, 8 to 9 years.
And you have an office here in the Design District, right?
We do. So we have an office in New York City at the Woolworth Building. We have an office in Los Angeles. And then we also have an office here. We're now headquartered in Miami in the Design District.
Great.
Awesome. So for us, much more, my first projects were of humble beginnings, of some very small single-family homes. And that's how we started, was doing single-family home projects. And then ultimately got to some large spec homes in the Coral Gables and Coconut Grove neighborhoods. And that was originally our thesis of personal resorts and premium locations and developing homes that an affluent clientele would want to just move into turnkey and be able to save years of their lives. And we joked also saving marriages, so that way many people could avoid some of the conflict that went into home designing. So that is how we got our start and originally where our first projects were.
So as the next generation, tell us what direction you see real estate development going. What types of projects, where, why Miami or South Florida? Tell us your perspective on all of that.
Sure. Great question. And I think what's exciting is you're really seeing this blend of real estate as obviously a physical asset, and what Alex said, very well put, between the idea of the science and the art that goes into it. And we're now in this moment where I think beyond the physical presence of the four walls and what the asset is blending that with what we would call lifestyle platforms. So no matter which demographic you might be in, I think you're seeing this concept of lifestyle platform really grow throughout the industry. And like through our lens, we see that with a wellness-focused communities brand that we're building in 3 markets across the country. In addition to that, our urban product line, our first 4 projects underway, a 5th one soon, and ultimately growing that into a 100-location vision of being a single location member or a multiple location member, and having freedom of life to travel with a backpack hotspot and really see the world, and using real estate as a membership platform to accomplish that. And then something I think we have a lot of commonality in, obviously when you get into the luxury residential space, this movement towards branded residences, and that's why we are doing an Edition condos and ultimately a sister Edition hotel in Fort Lauderdale Beach, and taking care of a clientele that is looking for high-end services along with incredible amenities in a large format condo environment. So to me, what I think we're specifically interested in is how do you build real estate that isn't just a one-off, but ultimately can be part of a growing demand that I see an audience either at an accessible price point or a luxury price point are seeking lifestyle platforms. And to me, that's what I want to dedicate the rest of my life as kind of my life's work on building these platforms to help people of all means be able to get experiences across the world.
Is this the result of the pandemic, or was this already started before that?
I mean, this has been something for us that has been since 2018 when we conceptualized and were launching the Urban brand. And then we're developing a new brand by the name of Wells that's meant to be the ultimate 7-star luxury experience. And for us, it's just where we want to focus, and it's been something that was pre-pandemic.
Okay. And Alex,
Sure. I'll answer your question two ways, geographically and then from a property perspective. From a geographic perspective, I think what we're seeing now in the transformation over the past 5 years are cities are now competing with each other, right? So you're seeing Miami, LA, New York, Austin, Nashville, all the key metros are competing with people, both from the lifestyle they afford people to the tax policy and how much taxes affect people's day-to-day expenses, from cost of living. We're in Miami, and it's certainly a city, and Florida is certainly a state that's winning that battle, both from no taxes, from the incredible sunshine. I mean, sunny in Florida 80 to 90% of the time period, from the lifestyle it affords on the weekends in October, right, or November we're now in. People can go on a boat, or they can play golf or play tennis, right? Can't do those in many other cities. So Florida is certainly a state that's been winning, and we've all seen the transformation and the benefits of that over the past several years. It used to be 5 to 10 years ago in Miami, when you took a residential building, it could be a building in Brickell, 80% of your buyers were foreign. Today, that same building has 50% are foreign and 50% are domestic, because you're seeing companies like Citadel come in. And they're not just coming in, they're moving their headquarters here and moving 2,000 people over 10 years. You're seeing Kirkland & Ellis, one of the largest law firm in the entire country, sign a lease for 10 years and take 120,000 square feet. You're seeing firms like Sidley and Austin move here. It's pretty transformative for the market in terms, and it's created a lot more stability in the Florida market, because it used to be Florida, and Miami in particular, was known more as a boom-bust market. We're seeing now it's a much more stable market, because it's much more driven domestically rather than just being driven by internationally and dependent on international currency fluctuations. To answer your question, from what we're seeing from a property sector perspective, now as the pandemic has shifted and people have more time on their hands in their office, maybe instead of 5 days a week, that same person may be there 3 or 4 days a week, and they have more time at home. People are much more lifestyle driven. So they want great quality of life, they want great services, they want great amenities. We're building a project in South Florida that's a golf-centric development. Golf was one of the biggest beneficiaries of the whole pandemic. There's now 25 million golfers, 6.5 million new golfers right at the onset of the pandemic. And that property is amazing because it speaks to what people want today. You want amazing golf. You want amazing tennis with all 4 championship surfaces. You want amazing marina, amazing services from Auberge Resorts, which is a great brand. What we're seeing, and that product reflects, is people want much more higher quality amenities and more amenitized buildings, because they have more time at their hands, they're spending more time at home, and that's what they're seeking.
So is the audience, is the buyer audience, target audience for your product mostly younger people who are working from home, or is there a general demographic?
Sure. I don't think we necessarily view things from a demographic perspective. We look at things from a psychographic perspective. So we don't just target people under the age of 25 with, this amount of disposable income, but we look for people that want the lifestyle our buildings tend to afford. Our projects tend to focus on the higher end of the market, just because we've seen more stability in that marketplace. And projects like Shell Bay, or we're about to launch the Shore Club with Robert M. Stern, we're tending to find people who are appealed to what the lifestyle those products afford. So at the golf club, it tends to be a golf-centric person, someone who loves to play tennis, someone who loves Auberge services. At the Shore Club will be someone who loves, the highest-end residences in the entire city. So we tend to look at things from a psychographic perspective.
Okay. And how does your approach differ from your families, since you're the next generation?
Sure. So on the family side, most certainly, I grew up in a household where pennies were counted very diligently, and everything was extremely budget-oriented as to the types of product our family was pursuing, whether that was hotels that eventually grew to single-family home communities, to a Class A office portfolio. We owned a Wally World outside of Disney World, which was an exciting opportunity growing up as a very popular child with Disney access tickets in elementary school and handing those out. So I definitely bought my friends in elementary school with that. But ultimately, for us, I think there's been an evolution on our side where I think you can see it in the 4 divisions of our company that we pursue a balanced approach. One end of the spectrum, which certainly comes from my DNA of that upbringing, is recurring revenue, stabilized assets, owning those long-term, and wanting to focus on core locations like the center of Coconut Grove with our urban location, or 12th and Washington in Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale Beach, steps from the ocean, or in downtown Coral Gables. So core asset location number 1, but in that case, it's about recurring revenue, accessible price points, and you're not trying to hit tremendous home runs with what you're looking to produce. But then certainly other aspects of my personality and what I enjoy in life are centered around luxury, wellness, seeing the world, and enjoying things that you've got to be able to enjoy with one life on this planet. So for me, that luxury approach is how we balance out the other side of our business, and that's been a differentiating approach to what I grew up in, and doing things like the Edition residences. We're already setting all types of pricing records in Fort Lauderdale Beach, which is really exciting. We set the market with our luxury product in Coral Gables, and have broken, every top line and average record for condo sales in that market. And then we're launching a sister project at 1505 Ponce in the coming months, which recently was approved, which we anticipate setting a new bar for luxury in Coral Gables. So for us, that's been my journey of learning a very diligent, practical, bread and butter recurring revenue side of the business, but then now marrying that with a high-end luxury reach for the stars part of our business.
Sure. I would maybe look at it not as how it differs, but it's a gradual evolution, which is always great and growing. So fortunately, I had the benefit of my dad starting the business in the 1990s and establishing a track record of success over decades and decades of being in the business, doing what you say you will do, having successful projects, and it's great because it's really built up the platform and allowed me to come into that in a positive way. I'd say we tend to be quite thematic about how we approach our investment philosophy. In the 90s, when he really built up his business, it was really focused around office. When you saw cleanup of the city under Rudy Giuliani, reduction in crime and people feeling more comfortable around New York City. I'd say today our focus and why I moved down to South Florida is we think it's the most attractive geographic region in the country right now. And when you look at it and compare it to certain cities in LA, people talking about robbery and crime, here it's pretty much the only city where you have a very strong positive news cycle, from companies coming in to homelessness at record lows. Mayor Suarez talks frequently about the record low homelessness you see here, but you can't walk around and not see it, right? Crime is very low, quality of life is very high. So Miami's a really exciting place, and geographically, we think we're just at the teenage years of Miami and its growth as a city.
That's been a recurring theme in a lot of the panels today of how booming Miami is, how hot the market is, how changing it is, evolving, and companies like Citadel that you mentioned that are moving here. How will that affect your projects? How will that affect the development, residential development going forward?
Sure. Okay. Very deferential. We were well taught with good manners, it seems. So
these two are friends, by the way.
So ultimately here in Miami and what's happening with the migration, I think we've said it for years. You've witnessed the greatest wealth migration in the history of this state, and certainly in multiple generations. And for us, I think what's really exciting is we have this opportunity to tap into who is coming here and meeting the demand of a wide spectrum of demographics, in my opinion. So you have business leaders like Alex mentioned, Citadel, and setting, world record type of pricing in Miami for housing with what Ken Griffin's bought, and other buyers throughout South Florida, including Palm Beach and other markets. So that's been exciting. But with that comes an entire array of population that is relocating to fulfill the jobs of the principals and the entrepreneurs that are making that migration. And for me, like especially with our urban product, it's exciting to be able to tap into, okay, let's say a neighborhood like Coconut Grove is now, it's always blossomed. It's where I've lived in that area for nearly 20 years. And it's gone through its peaks and valleys through that. Just to give you an example of this kind of ecosystem of layering of different types of product and what is happening because of the great policy of, in my opinion, state leadership and local leadership, is that you get the entrepreneurs and the principals who are bringing the jobs and the business. They're looking for a luxury type of product, right? Then you get a variety of kind of next stream in the pipeline that are looking for high-end, maybe luxury, maybe mid-market. Now they're moving into markets like Coconut Grove, where we're building the next Class A office building to open in the market. We're 50% pre-leased. We've got a Michelin star award-winning group coming into that there. We'll have a private dining room that's omakase style, but Latin inspired. So you have all of this ecosystem, but okay, well, where do those workers live, right? So now you have the high-end business. You've got the lieutenants and the next layer of employees that are relocating. They're taking over a market, moving in aggressively into a market like Coconut Grove, where you've seen 200 to 300% price appreciation since the start of the pandemic. We underwrote our office building at $60 triple net. We're out on the market now for 110 triple net. So to see that kind of growth that has come and the businesses that are coming with it, and then ultimately the ecosystem of food services and other type of service professionals that are then needing jobs in the area to support the growth that has come, that to me is an exciting, balanced community that is getting created. And that story is happening all over South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, same thing in North Beach Village where we're developing, in Coral Gables, Miami Beach. The list goes on, where you're seeing these wholly enclosed ecosystems getting created, and it's creating real estate needs up and down the spectrum, and also the opportunity for jobs and housing up and down the spectrum. So for me, super, super exciting and interesting moment to be here.
Sure. So obviously, the Real Deal Showcase is attracting a ton of residential. You see some of the top residential brokers in the market here. See Oren, some others. I think if you poll people, if you look at even in the rise of rising mortgage rates, what's happening in this market, you read Nashville, Austin, certain markets, you have inventory listings up 160, 150%. In Miami, inventory listings are up 10%. So I think what's very healthy about this market is it's fairly supply constrained, particularly in submarkets like the beach and Coconut Grove. For instance, you only have 700 homes on the water in all of Miami Beach, and that really trickles through to condos and so forth. You're still seeing home prices sell, certain homes sell in Venetian Islands for $5,000 a foot. What you're seeing happen in Miami with people coming in, it's still relatively a smaller market than New York, just factually given the size of it. New York's a bigger city. But what you are seeing with companies like Citadel, Kirkland & Ellis, Sidley & Austin, Blackstone expand here very rapidly, Apollo, all these big financial services and law firms, they provide a lot of high-paying jobs, a lot of high-quality jobs, very sticky jobs. They're not just coming here and signing temporary leases. They're signing leases for 10 years. So it's creating a depth to the residential market that's not really ever existed here, and a higher quality of buyer that has higher disposable income, higher net worth, and much stronger. So you're seeing a much healthier market than it's ever been. And frankly, success begets success. With companies moving here of that ilk, you will likely see more companies come here. Doesn't mean the pace that happened right in 2020 during the pandemic is sustainable. Clearly that's not. But COVID was a transformational event that accelerated some of the growth you would have seen play out in Miami over years and years and years, compressed into 1 year and 2 years. And I think you're going to see that propel Miami over the next, series 5 to 10 years. And when we think about development, right, some of these buildings aren't completed for 5 years. So we really have to think long term about the health of the market.
As you're building, one of the issues here is rising construction costs, rising insurance, rising cost of debt. How is that affecting your developments?
So that is most certainly a reality that we all have to acknowledge is here in the immediacy. Much of it is making sure that when you are, let's start with construction costs, buying out a project, tying up GMPs in a secure manner, moving very quickly, getting deposits down before there's cost increases, and having a great relationship with subcontractors. And in our case, we've gone from 100 million of projects locally to now 4 billion to be developed in the next 4 to 5 years in South Florida. So that keeps attention of subcontractors, building relationships, and making sure that you can control pricing over a reliable period of time. In addition to that, we're also making a deal with our general contractor about, hey, we have this much visibility into projects over this amount of time horizon. Let's make a deal to where there is some fee saving in return for the consistency that you're going to see over that period of time. So in some ways, it's having to get creative to cost reduce. But ultimately, I think you have to be realistic that if you're building a luxury product, can you pass that cost along to your consumer? That's a question. And especially in multifamily, I think you're seeing a lot of projects that are going to hit pause, which is unfortunate because there is a housing need, but ultimately they are not only extremely cost conscious, but also very, very interest rate conscious. When you're looking at valuations of cap rates and exit prices against the ultimate all-in cost up front, it can make for a very compressed environment. And I'm hearing from many of my development peers of, they might not publicly say we're canceling a project, but you can definitely feel that there is a slow walking until capital markets stabilize. Because right now what you're seeing in the capital markets is an incredible movement up and down of rates and very sensitive to, just hanging on to every inflation data point. So to me, I think, you have to be willing to face reality that can you build and deliver at today's prices? Do you have enough margin in your deal to make it worth it in order to absorb any price escalation along the way before you're fully bought out? And if you're doing any type of rental project, do you believe that the rates that we're seeing now, which are by far records and have accumulated quite a bit in the last couple of years, that those are going to hold? So, it's a very tricky market to be navigating, but also a very exciting, opportunistic market as well.
Sure. While you've seen increased revenue potential in Miami market, if you told someone 5 years ago that the Mon could sell out for $5,000 a foot, I think that idea would have been anathema. While you're seeing that, it's no secret, you're also seeing cost pressures in the market. You're seeing construction costs up year over year 20, 30%, given the increased activity you're seeing in the market. Subcontractors, given all the activity in the market, are very much being able to choose which jobs they work on, which allows them to push the margin that they want for their work, because now they're not begging you for your job, they actually get a pick. Do they work on our job or his job or someone else's job? And that certainly amplified the cost pressure in the market, particularly when you have a very low unemployment rate. But what you are seeing, and then on the insurance perspective, insurance rates are certainly up as well. Where it gets very tricky in Miami, it's typically not our business model, but when you're building a building you think you're building it for $500 or $600 a foot and selling it out for $900 a foot, and your margin is very low on the net rentable. Well, now if costs come up and the market's not great and prices come down, then you're in trouble. Typically, if you're building something on the beach where that could go for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a foot, now you have a lot more pressure, you have a lot more wiggle room as you see costs increase. Certainly carry costs have increased as you see lenders pull out of the market given some of the craziness in economic activity in the world. We very much have been focused on that margin, right? So when you're building at the higher end, like a project like we're doing in Shell Bay or at the Shore Club, when you have higher revenue potential, now you have more room to absorb certain cost pressures. But certainly there are plenty of projects that don't have that wiggle room, where they're planning to sell it for $1,000 a foot, and now costs are up, and maybe they don't get $1,000 a foot, and that pricing really, compresses in on them. I think that balance you see in the Miami market versus some of the other markets is here people typically sell before they build, so it's a natural deterrent to excess supply, versus markets like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco. Typically you have to be in construction before you can start sales. Typically buyers, that's what they want to see, and they want to see more near-term deliveries. Here people start sales campaigns, and then once they reach a certain sales threshold, then they start to build. So we've always seen that in the market has created a natural deterrent to excess supply, and it's kept the market fairly stable.
And have you been able to get construction financing that you're looking for?
Yes, I mean, it is a moment where one of our board members said, you know, if you're picking projects right now, you're either looking at always yeses and I guess I should say heck yeses for a more moderate approach. And right now, this is the moment to only be doing projects that are heck yeses, because you need to make sure, as to Alex's point, that you have that margin. And for us, on the construction financing side, you know, on the condos, we have a very competitive process that's run by our capital markets brokers and our relationships already in the market. So for us, there most certainly is a requirement to see a stable proof of concept, that you have meaningful pre-sales, that you have a great price per foot that proves out the thesis of your pro forma. So I do think that there's no doubt that lenders are being very, very picky at the moment, that, you know, it is their job to put money out, but it is also, you know, not to get super in the weeds on it, but if they're doing large loans and they're participating it out, and that part of the market has been in a freeze at the moment, then ultimately they've got to do whole loans or with relationships that they already have existing. So they're being very picky with their business, and ultimately they want to know that what you're putting in front of them makes sense, has proof of concept. So we're following that formula, and you know, that's something that I think we navigate very well.
I think it's a reality that lending standards have tightened, particularly for construction loans. You know, particularly given the pace of the Fed hikes and the uncertainty surrounding that. Certain banks aren't lending, and that's a reality of the world. What we're finding is the banks that are lending are very, very business plan and sponsor focused. They want to lend to the sponsors who've had strong track records of success, who have navigated tough economic cycles and made it out through it. They're very much focused on who's done it before and done it successfully from a sponsor perspective. And then they're very, very much focused on your business plan. Can you manage cost? Have you sold units? Is your business plan sound? Does it make sense what you're doing? You know, are you seeking crazy aspirational pricing that's never been hit before? Those are some of the things that give people paucity. But in this sort of environment, strong sponsors with very sound business plans and demonstrating success, those are the winners. We're very much in a operator's market, where those who can execute will be the winners, and those who can't, it will be a tricky time.
And just to add to that, I mean, and especially on multifamily projects where it's very balance sheet focused and financing, I think you're just seeing lenders want to see more equity in deals, want to see leverage ratios come down, and they want to lend, but you have to know that, can you capitalize that project with additional equity? Can you absorb the interest rate increases that we've seen? You know, it was an environment where it was SOFR +2, SOFR +3, maybe less, maybe more. Well, now SOFR is no longer 0.5, it's, you know, over 3. So that fundamentally will change many business plans as people move forward, and that leverage ratio will come down, and those equity requirements will go up.
Are there any other unique challenges that you face because you're the next generation?
I'll take a minute to think about that. No. Bring it on.
Are you preparing for a possible recession? And have your family members told you anything about the previous recession that things you should look out for or ways you should proceed?
Sure. So our philosophy on this has always been, our business has been around since the 1990s, and while over the past 10 years we've seen mostly an upcycle and all, fairly relative, other than the pandemic lull, it's been relatively up for the past 10 years. But the businesses that are successful and enduring through time are always the ones that can navigate the most challenging circumstances. So they don't overextend in upcycles, they don't overpay for land, they know how to manage construction costing. Certainly the ones who can make it through periods like the great financial crisis or the dot-com bubble or certain lulls are always the ones that are most successful through time. So we do that by always being disciplined. We're always 100% treating every dollar that's spent in a project like it's in our pocket. We manage costs very effectively. We're very proactive in advancing our business plan forward and establishing revenue, even in the rosiest of periods or the most challenging of periods. Always being focused to push your project forward, push your business forward. So when you have the more challenging times, you're in a good position to succeed and navigate through it.
And do you see South Florida as weathering a potential recession better than other areas?
Sure. So I think I used the statistic a little bit earlier, but you have such tight inventory in this market. You have very little homes. I think I used the statistic 700 homes only on the water in Miami Beach. In markets like Austin and Nashville, you're seeing listings explode. You've seen very little movement in Miami. I think while it's no secret mortgage rates have gone above 7% and the Fed has hiked, we've also seen some positive news today, right? The inflation month over month and core was 0.28%. The headline reading came down to 7.7%, and the stock market responded in a really strong way. I think when you see a market like Florida that has natural barriers to entry and that there's little land and it's surrounded by water, you have very, very tight inventory. So it's hard. And then couple that with what you've seen in '08 when you saw lending standards really, really get wacky, right? You saw people lend with very little down payments. You saw subprime lending explode. Over these past series of years, you've seen balance sheets are really healthy, loan qualities are really strong, and then you couple that within Miami, you have very tight inventory. Even in the face of rising interest rates, you're still seeing a very healthy market here.
I can speak through two lenses on the urban side of our business and then the luxury side of the business. And in my mind, there's this mental image of definitely storm clouds and gathering across the country, but we call it sunny South Florida for a reason, and that's the feeling that I think we have at the moment, that there still is this positive net migration into the state. They're bringing jobs, they're bringing real estate needs, and for us, the two ends of our business that we're focusing on, one with urban and accessible price point housing to make sure that we are giving people a choice for lower top line rent and core in demand submarkets, and that's something that's never going to change. There's going to be somebody that needs housing, wants to be in the neighborhood that they love, wants pricing that helps them keep more of their income as a percentage of their earnings in their pocket versus rent, and wants to be in housing that they're proud of. So that for us is a core mission that up and down is always going to be there as long as there's positive migration trends, which is exactly what we are continuing to see. And then on the luxury side, proud of the Edition sales team. I don't know where you are, but even another sale today to a buyer from Chicago, record pricing, relocating from a state that, in my opinion, just doesn't have great policies at the moment, and is driving entrepreneurs and people of affluence out of the market, and we're still continuing to see that buyer profile continue to South Florida, and it's by no means at the pace of what we saw from Labor Day of 2020 through about 6 months ago, but it is still very much a lifestyle story where the affluent buyer is making a lifestyle choice, whether they're empty nesting, and want a higher quality of life, whether they are relocating because of business policies, and ultimately that is still in our favor. And I think those two storylines, that as long as we don't see something catastrophic, which I don't think is coming, I think that we're working through a readjustment of credit, which is having an effect throughout the markets. But the fundamentals of people wanting to be here are still strong, and why we're bullish on our activity. But it's also a moment to really make sure you're focusing on the heck yeses of projects, and that you're being opportunistic, because I think we're entering into a really good buyer's market where there's an opportunity for commercial real estate that has not necessarily been financed the best because everybody was chasing deals over the last couple of years, and it's an opportunity to go in. And you might not hear about this publicly because a lot of people will privately work through some type of workout, but it's a great buyer's opportunity to be looking at commercial real estate right now.
And I just add, our business model has always been to focus on the highest barrier to entry submarkets within major cities and not do anything cookie cutter, to answer your question. So in challenging times, you always have a product that's super desirable. In this city, we employed it. We built it 150 Charles in the West Village. The West Village is one of the most difficult areas to get approved in. Same thing with building 10 Madison Square West and Madison Square Park. West Hollywood, Santa Monica, both we built in two of the hardest submarkets in the entire country to get approvals in. And we've employed that same philosophy here. So Shore Club, which we just got approved, Miami Beach, it's a very challenging area to get approvals in, given it's a historic district. And most projects either have to get approved by the Historic Preservation Board or the Design Review Board, and you could require as many as 5/7 vote. We're building an exciting golf course development. Our partner Ari Pearl's here. Our sales team, Darren Tanzi and Mark Brandt, are in the other corner. But golf, we're building on 120 acres. To get 120 acres near the ocean in Miami Beach, never happening again, right? Your scarcity of land, you just literally can't find it. And we're partnering with Auberge to do something really incredible from a service component. But I think I was discussing this statistic. I don't think there's been a new golf course built in Miami in 25 years just because there's no land. So to be thoughtful about circumstances, we've always focused on building in the highest barrier to entry submarkets or the highest barrier to entry product types. And that's typically how we found success, and that endures over time.
Great. Let me ask one quick question, and then I'll open it up to the audience for any questions you may have. What would be your advice for anyone of the next generation who's starting out in the business?
Sure. So how I've always thought about it, I'm actually 30 years old, but what do you think about it from what you're the age of you're 22 and you're starting out of college, right? You're 22, your business, your career could be 50, 60, 70 years. So always thinking, I know it's very easy to get overwhelmed and want to achieve things very quickly. We live in an instantaneous gratification culture, right? You can access Uber Eats, you can access food in 5 seconds. You go in your Uber or Lyft app, you can access a car in 7 seconds. You go on Instagram and you can see everything everyone's doing. We live in this instant gratification culture, given technology, and I think really the important thing to think about your career as 50 or 60 years, and not everything needs to be achieved in 7 seconds, but to really think about all the decades you have to really build on that success, to gain knowledge, and to really imbue yourself with the right tools you need to be successful over a very long period of time versus feeling you need to do everything right away.
So I wouldn't wish the development business on my worst enemy, and it is a tough business to be a part of. And what I would give advice to anybody that's getting into the business is there is no one path to development. Development is in our mind this 360 ecosystem that includes a finance brain, legal, design and construction, marketing, technology, the list just goes on and on and on of having a skill set of one of those entry points, utilizing it in an extremely focused manner, and being able to then surround yourself with people that represent the skills that you do not possess as the quote-unquote developer. And I'm blessed. We've grown our headcount from, it was originally 3 of us that started 8 years ago. We're now at 50, with probably by a staffing plan sometime in Q1 we'll be around 60, 65 in headcount. And for me, I've now developed a team that I can say I have a captain for every department. I have a division leader for each of our 4 divisions. And there's no one person in this sport, if you will, that can play all the positions. So my advice to anybody is get really good at one of those skill sets, and then make sure to surround yourself with team, because this is the ultimate team sport.
Another thing I would just say is, I'm a big reader. I love to study, great leaders. So if you read, people like Phil Knight and his amazing biography, Shoe Dog, or people of that, Warren Buffett, or people of that ilk, I think the number one thing that people get confused when they see people who are super successful, like a Phil Knight or Warren Buffett or people of that ilk, it's always thinking that they were born with some supernatural abilities and they were always born that way. Because you hear about these people after who, they became who they are, not what it took to become who they are. So I think the number one thing to remember is no one's born out of the womb with a perfect tennis swing or a perfect golf swing or learning how to invest in stocks like Warren Buffett perfectly. Yes, people have certain aptitudes, but through hard work, that's always how you nurture and develop them. So always remembering the people you admire or who you deem successful or who you want to emulate, they weren't always that way. They worked and developed, and over long periods of time of working really hard and nurturing certain aptitudes that's how they developed into who they are. And always to keep that perspective in mind that anyone can get better at anything. All they have to do is work really hard at it in the correct way and really look to grow their abilities.
Good advice. Open to anyone with any questions. Hannah has a microphone in case anyone has any questions.
I do. We have 1 or 2. I think we're just going to take 1 or 2 questions, and then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you. Hi, Omar, London Foster. So there's this particular situation here in Florida. I don't know how you guys approach this to the buyers, which is the sea level rise. Again, sea level rise. They keep saying that the ocean is going to rise. Don't buy here because, your property is going to sink, blah, blah, blah. So how do you approach that as a developer, as a seller? And how do you tell people that we're looking down 40 years, 50 years? I don't know. When is that going to happen? So what do you think about that, the sea level rise?
Sure. So I think it's very commonly used in Miami to talk about the sea level rise. Obviously, Miami Beach in particular is a place that's surrounded by water. But I think what people also don't realize is Manhattan is an island surrounded by water. San Francisco is an island surrounded by water. Climate change isn't a Miami-specific problem. It's a global problem. But, obviously, it would have much larger outsized near-term effects if we were thinking about building a house and not raising it, right? So certainly we're very cognizant on building in areas that are very low to the ground, that don't have proper irrigation, and so forth. But it's not specific to Miami. It's specific to pretty much most coastal cities globally. And Miami, if you're not building in areas that are very low to the ground, that have healthy geographies, healthy footprints, that's typically been how we've tried to solve for it.
Just real quick add-on, great question. I think there's 2 buckets of topics. One on sustainability, on what we can do as responsible developers in trying to reduce our impact on communities and climate overall. So that's something that I think many cities, especially here in South Florida, like Miami Beach, Coral Gables, 2 thought leaders on the sustainability aspect, City of Miami and Mayor Suarez's efforts as well, So the sustainability factors that you build into the project, for example, stormwater retention, irrigation that's through reclaimed water on the project, to ultimately use for things like plant irrigation or toilet systems. Those are offensive strategies that we have to implement on a go-forward basis. And cities have to work with us, because that stuff's not free, it's actually expensive and not even close to economical, but it's the right thing to do. So if it's the right thing to do, we need to be working with cities and the communities on figuring out strategies to help offset that cost, such as impact fee reductions, credits, extra buildable area, all things to say there is a problem, but we need a solution, and let's think outside the box on how we get there. And then the second bucket is defense. So what are you doing for resiliency in the project? So for example, where are you placing generators? What kind of building systems are you using if there's a storm event and you're able to get the building back online within your own ecosystem for power generation, to make sure that water is pumping, elevators are working. In addition to that, the stormwater retention and how that comes out. As I discussed, freeboards, like in the city of Miami Beach, our urban project got an additional 5 feet in order to account for a potential road raising of an additional 5 feet throughout the city, and that's already been incorporated into our project. So for us, I think it's that combination of offense on sustainability programs, defense on resiliency built into the project, and that's what we have to do to help, one, be responsible, but also make sure that our real estate is resilient through that period of time that you discussed.
Awesome. All right. I think we had one more question over here, and then we will wrap it up.
Ina, sorry, it's 2 questions. Don't kill me. But the first question was, what defines a 7-star project? The one that you mentioned, Rishi, that you're doing.
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
You said that you're doing a 7-star project. What defines 7-star? And then my second question would be branded residence. What's the why? It may have been mentioned earlier, but I'd like to walk away knowing why. What's the why behind it?
Yeah, so on the 7-star question, I have to save that for a future panel to make sure I get invited back. So on that one, it's a brand that we're launching that I'm just going to be a little bit discreet about at the moment. But I see my press team nodding yes, so that was a good answer, right, guys? But ultimately...
We want to know.
See, now you got to have me back. But the idea is taking quality and service to levels that are not seen worldwide, and that's a preview to what we're alluding to. On the branded residences, why? Alex and I can both speak at length, I'm sure, for hours about why, but ultimately, let's talk about 2 categories very succinctly. Number one is we as developers know, or at least are betting on, why are we partnering with Marriott in addition? Because there's a brand premium associated with that. There's a caliber of project that a customer should expect as a world-renowned company like Marriott and a brand like Edition are expecting to be delivered by the developer, and that gets passed on by a high-end level of confidence to the buyer that they are going to be receiving, in Marriott's case with Edition, their co-5-star brand of what they call the next generation of luxury, adhering to a simplified, more natural form of luxury and community building. So for us to take that playbook, because, the playbook we got was 700 pages from Marriott on brand standards. Our entire team had to go through training on how to adhere to what it is that they wanted to see. So that drives confidence and product quality. And the other side of that is ultimately the price point that you're looking, that comes from that you're betting that there's going to be a premium. And I'll let Alex please piggyback on that, because obviously a wealth of knowledge from his family's firm as well.
Sure. So we've done quite a lot of branded residential. Funny enough, branded residential has been around for a really long period of time. I think over 100 years. I think when the Sherry Netherland was built in the 1920s. But it's really grown a lot over the past decade, up 170%. And why is that, per your question? What you're seeing is where we've seen the most success with branded residential is when the brand has certain values that the demographic is attracted to, and then that's reflected through the property you're building. So that's why you're seeing most branded residential is through hotel brands, because there's a certain buy-in that the customer has and trust the customer has, whether it's a brand like Auberge Resorts Collection or Four Seasons or Edition. We built an Edition branded residence in West Hollywood. People have a certain familiarity with those brands and what they provide, and you typically see up to 30% price premium for product with those brands, particularly when you can manifest that through the amenities that that brand represents. So for instance, we're doing an Auberge branded residences that will have a world-class spa, 3 restaurants called Shell Bay, amazing tennis courts, a marina. Auberge is known for great wellness properties, great food, for extraordinary experiences. So certainly when the brand has certain attributes that your demographic buys into, and that's implemented through a correct development plan, we see a high price premium and also higher sales velocity because you have a built-in customer base.
Okay, I want to thank our panelists, Rishi and Alex. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming to our South Florida Showcase and Forum, Real Estate Showcase and Forum.